Now then, she might not realise it, but her investigations have just started. She's taking the first steps in breaking down of her food. The mouth is like a chopping board. Well, it is. The teeth chop up the food and grind it to a pulp. It's a very physical process. Chewing also increases the surface area of the food, which helps the first chemical processes of digestion. And that's where saliva comes in. Wonderful stuff, saliva. All 1.5 litres a day of it. It moistens the food, making it easier to swallow. Food's got to be broken down chemically so that the large molecules of food can be changed into molecules small enough to be absorbed by the body. Saliva contains an enzyme which starts breaking down the starch in the bread and chips into sugars the body can actually use.
OK, so what's happening here? In the mouth, the carbohydrates start being broken down, but I don't think my body's actually absorbing anything yet.
She's right. There's still more breaking down, more digesting to do. Once the food reaches the stomach, glands in the stomach lining secretes a liquid called the gastric juice, which helps break down protein. Everything's mixed together and churned up by the muscles in the stomach wall. A lot of the carbohydrates and some of the protein have been broken down, but hardly any of the fat from the food's been digested yet.
I'm stuffed. I couldn't eat another thing. Oh.
So, now the food's in my stomach, the proteins and carbohydrates are breaking down. But what's next?
Hi, Rusty. I thought I'd come and see what you're up to.
Well, I thought I'd have a look and see what happens to the food after the customers had it.
Well, I think I've got a pretty good idea what happens to the food up to when it gets to the stomach. In fact, I can feel it there right now. But I'm not too sure what happens after that.
Well, it all moves on to the small intestines.
Ah, the duodenum. What happens there?
This is where the fats in the burger are broken down. Bile, which is made in the liver, together with enzyme, this time from the pancreas, break down the fats. These enzymes from the pancreas complete the digestion of the rest of the carbohydrates and the proteins too.
So, in the duodenum, fats are dispersed into tiny droplets. And carbohydrates and proteins are digested here too.
So now my burgers and chips have been well and truly broken down by all the enzymes and everything. But is my body actually able to make use of all the nutrients from the food yet?
Just about. That's what happens next in the next part of your small intestines. The ileum. Help me fold these, Femi. All the nutrients from your digested foods passes through the walls of the ileum to get into your bloodstream. This means at last the body can actually make use of the nutrients.
Why am I folding up these cloths, Rusty?
The walls of the intestines aren't flat. It's covered with millions of tiny little fingers called the villi. There are about 4,000 villi in the area of the size of a fingernail, and each of these contain blood vessels which absorb the nutrients from the body.
So because there are so many, there's a much larger surface area to absorb all the nutrients.
She's right. By the end of the small intestines, nearly all the nutrients from the food have been absorbed into the blood system.
So, by the time the foods pass through the ileum, they're broken down enough for the nutrients to be absorbed into the blood.
And it's on to the last stage of digestion.
The large intestine. But what's actually left by now?
All that's left is a little water and undigested food. Fibre, for instance, which helps to keep the feces moist. So there's not much of Femi's burger left. A little bit of water which has been absorbed through the walls of the large intestines. The remaining material, the feces, becomes a little bit more solid. And that passes out of the body through the anus.
Right, well, that was a fairly graphic overview of the entire process. During ingestion, food is taken into the mouth and physically broken into smaller pieces by the teeth. It's a physical process. Digestion is the process during which enzymes break down large, insoluble molecules into smaller, soluble molecules. It begins in the mouth and continues in the stomach and small intestine. It's a chemical process. Absorption, when these smaller molecules are absorbed into the blood, is the other chemical stage, and it happens in the ileum. And egestion, the removal of undigested food as well as dead cells and bacteria, happens via the large intestine and through the anus. Remember, if you're asked in an exam for a description of digestion, you don't need to describe the whole process from the moment the food enters the body to the time it exits, just digestion.